So I've been told I have 16 minutes, and I've got a fair amount of content, so I may be kind of shuffling through fairly quickly, but definitely if you have any questions, write them down. I'm just going to start my timer as a reminder here for myself. So just some quick objectives for me tonight is just helping you to understand how dementia affects daily functioning and safety in the home, understand how an occupational therapist could be support to you in the community for helping to sustain living in the community longer, aging in place at home. And then just kind of a brief overview of some of the strategies, some of the things that we might be thinking about as an OT coming into the home and suggesting to you to make within the home environment. So, in terms of dementia, changes in function are frequently the first things that we see. For a quick example there, your loved one no longer corrects knitting errors. So we start to see some of those more complex activities of daily living, or what we call ADLs, start to see subtle changes in those. And it's a crucial component of a diagnostic and statistical manual that we use for definitions for diagnoses of various mental health and neurocognitive disorders. So it really interferes in your social and functional abilities at home, and that tends to where we see it happen the most is those early stages there. Stages of loss, obviously the last thing in is the first thing that goes with the disease, and it's a degenerative process following in the reverse order of development towards childhood and infancy. So we kind of become this adult, we grow old, and then we start to go in that reverse order. The key about it is it's an individual process. It can change. It's different with everyone. So when you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. It presents uniquely for that person. So that's where, kind of an in vivo, in-home assessment by an OT can be very beneficial because it's specific to that individual. And we can often see that it even changes with time of day. So again, where we might start to see some of those changes are in those what we call IADLs. So we call them instrumental activities of daily living. So things like your cooking, your shopping, your cleaning, doing your banking, managing your medications, driving, very complex tasks that require a lot of cognitive functioning. So some of the concerns that we often see here is forgetting to take medication, higher risk of falls within the home, thinking that they can still drive even though there's more red flags and concerns about that. Obviously within the kitchen, forgetting to turn off the stove, leaving things on the stove, and then exit seeking, the concern about leaving the home, wandering away from the home, getting lost, especially during colder temperatures. And then as kind of the disease progresses, it starts to hit more of those activities of daily living. So those personal care type things, eating, dressing, bathing, grooming. So some of the things that we look at there is, if they're struggling to maintain their hygiene, if there's more incontinence, pressure wounds. As we start to see a disease progress, we start to see confusion, what we call agnosia, where they confuse things. I gave a bad example there, but one of the scarier examples I might have is taking a razor and using it as a toothbrush. So that's where they confuse the object for something other than what it actually is. So challenges for caregivers is obviously more hands-on care. We often call it very fatiguing because it's the 36-hour day. You're doing 36 hours of work in a 24-hour day, so it can be very challenging. Obviously the stress that comes along with it, any financial burden that comes along with it in terms of supporting the loved one in home, and ensuring proper nutrition, obviously, and safe-proofing the home. And that's where, the occupational therapist is going to come in a lot, is looking at that safety in the home to help you, loved ones, whomever it is impacted by the disease, to live at home longer and safely. So as an occupational therapist, we tend to focus on this kind of PEO model. We are kind of a holistic practitioner, so we look at the personal factors, the environmental factors, and the occupational factors, and they all kind of intertwine with each other and they impact each other. So we can't look at one separate from the other. So personal factors that we're looking at are cognitive impairment, physical and emotional functioning that's starting to go away. Demands of the task or the occupation, are there too many steps to the task for the individual? Can we break it down? Does it have to be done exactly the same way it used to be done? Can we modify it so that they still feel like they're engaging in the task, but we're modifying it for them? And then obviously physical environmental changes as well as social. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So with respect to the social, is often, there's a term that we use as excess disability, and this is a term that refers to dysfunction that's disproportionate to the degree of cognitive impairment. And unfortunately, as we're trying to help loved ones with dementia, we can create this excess disability. So we could have environmental factors within the environment, so clutter, noise, too many people, and we create more disability for that individual than their actual cognitive impairment has. We could outpace them. Things like that, where we're putting too much pressure to get the activity done quicker, and we're outpacing what cognitive abilities they have at that point. So the risks to the person with dementia is obviously loss of independence, restricting their freedom and quality of life, loss of meaning and purpose in their life, feeling more lonely and unproductive. Increased use of restraints, that's more if they kind of go into a different setting of care. Increased behaviors, frustration, things like that, and early admission to long-term care facilities. So I know, Susan, you asked if I was missing anything on this slide when I sent them, but no, it's just one point that we really like to hit home, is that engaging our loved ones in meaningful activities of utmost importance, because it can help really significantly decrease challenging behaviors. With dementia, we, as the behavioral response team, behaviors are a response to something, an unmet need usually, and that's what we're trying to do, is engage them in activities and figure out what that unmet need is, because when we meet that need, a lot of these behaviors tend to settle down, and whether that's just frustration and anger just with the process. So are we outpacing them in an activity? Have we set them up for failure in an activity, and it's creating those frustrations? So we got to meet that need. And that's where OT can come in, occupational therapy, is we look at occupations, and that's anything anybody does in their day, whether it's self-care, productivity, or leisure activities. And our goal as occupational therapists is to increase engagement in meaningful activities and occupations that the person wants to do or needs to do. So we try to create a better fit between the person, their abilities, their occupations, and then the environment, to make sure that they all kind of fit. So do we modify the environment? Do we modify the activity? Do we modify personal factors? Skills in removing or minimizing environmental and social barriers. So a lot of our goals is what I just talked about there: increasing activity engagement, increasing safety, helping to improve self-esteem for them, decrease the stress, helping them to remain at home. And that's key, is our goal is to help you age at home longer, remain in the home environment. Some of the tools that we might use are some self-report questionnaires like a Lott and Brody, or disability assessment for dementia. Often they're great tools because they're quick screening tools. We can get the caregivers to fill them out to look at what areas of strength the person has and what areas of deficit. There obviously are some limitations to these tools in terms of they can overestimate or underestimate their abilities, because if we're setting them up with some excess disability, then we're not maybe getting an accurate capture of things. And this is where an OT is going to come into play, is we're going to come into the environment and actually do an in vivo assessment to see that individual engaging within their environment in their occupations. So obviously we can provide objective standardized assessments of abilities, determine how much assistance is needed for a task, identify strengths and deficits, assess safety concerns. Would they benefit from a different level of care, whether that's retirement, independent living, long-term care, or independent living with supports. And then obviously assessing factors in the physical and social environment that might be contributing to that excess disability. So some of the things as an OT that I do, I can assess cooking, grocery shopping, dressing, bathing, eating, toileting, driving, money management, medication management. So I have a variety of assessment tools that I can utilize. Some occupational therapists in the community are also trained what we call AMPS assessors, so the assessment of motor and processing skills, which I do have that certification. And the great part about that is it's a standardized assessment of actually just watching somebody do a task that's picked from a list of about 150 tasks. And I score their abilities from kind of a motor ability as well as a processing. How's the cognitive processing going in that activity? So benefits of that is I'm watching them actually do a task within their environment. So that kind of contributes to the direct observation of ADLs and IADLs. We can use standardized assessments, especially if I'm looking at financial management, if there's concerns about their ability to manage bills, things like that. We have a variety of assessment tools that we can use to kind of test those skills. And then assessing individual components. So maybe I'm going to do some cognitive assessments to see where they might have deficits with respect to the cortical functions in their brain. So which is kind of the surface level of your brain. So, occupational therapy interventions, we really focus on adapting the physical, social environment and modifying the tasks, help to educate the clients and family in order to increase participation and performance of meaningful activities. So, if we're looking at the physical environment, some of the things we might be looking at are, can we help with keeping that independence in tasks? So in the kitchen, in their bedroom, can we label drawers? Can we remove clutter to kind of minimize distraction? Because if there's too much going on in the environment, it's too many things being inputted into the brain and it can be overwhelming. So you need to simplify things within your environment. Labeling drawers, and what I've also seen as the disease progresses is even putting pictures on the cupboards in your kitchen that show the plates here and the glasses here, because visual memory can stay a little bit longer than kind of verbal memory, or even just your memory, your long-term stores of where were the plates again, but if I see the plates, oh, the plates go in here. Signage on doors, trying to get them into the routine of returning items to the same spot, just because procedural memory can stay longer into the disease process. So that's our ability to get on a bike if we haven't ridden it for 2 years and do that. It's a procedural memory. We've done it so many times that it's become a habit for us. Obviously removing clutter, distractions, minimizing noise if they are engaging in an activity, minimize noise and distractions. Other things that I was thinking about is removing rugs, falls, tripping hazards, things that might contribute to that, removing clutter around the home, improving lighting within the home, especially later into the evenings, reducing shadows and whatnot, so that because as the disease progresses, our visual abilities actually change. So it's kind of reducing glare, not using glossy paints, having matte finish paints within the home, lighter colors so that light bounces off of it and creates more illumination. And then obviously some technology, which I will cover in a little bit. So modifying the social environment. So when we're helping our loved ones, we're using short, simple sentences. We're breaking down the activity into short instructions. And I might want to give one instruction at a time and let them engage in it and then do the next instruction. Because if you put in too much input, we also have the deficit of processing all that information. And if I give 5 steps all at one time, they might still be struggling to just focus on step number 1 and won't have heard steps 2 through 5. Ask yes or no questions, make direct eye contact, obviously interact with our loved ones in a respectful, friendly, and non-controlling tone, using written, visual, or physical cues to avoid lengthy explanations. So what we often say here is use a lot of visual input as well. So I might pantomime the task, let's go brush our teeth, let's go brush our hair, because then they're connecting the verbal with the visual and seeing me, oh, we're gonna go brush our hair, because maybe they don't fully understand the words, but they see the task of brushing their hair, brushing their teeth, let's go shave. Pantomiming it can help with the retention of what you want them to do. So modifying the task, obviously redefine what a successful task completion is. So we have to kind of help our loved ones, and part of that is just what is going to be success for them. It may not be what it used to be. So now we need to kind of modify the task and give them a break, and give ourselves a break as well in terms of what is going to be success for them. Because their reality is their reality, and we have to help them. So can we reduce the number of steps? Maybe we use more prepackaged items, speed dials on the phone, things like that. A list of numbers beside the phone. Developing a routine for them, so the same time every day, getting them to do the same thing. That's that procedural memory, because if they do it more and more, same time, same activity, same way, it becomes retained as a habit. Reduce time pressures, take breaks, and obviously using adaptive tools for dressing and bathing. So, obviously adaptive tools for dressing would be sock aids, anything that can assist with breaking that task down. Also, like with dressing, you can actually lay out pictures of how to go about getting dressed, or you lay the clothing out based on how you want them to put it on. So underwear first, pants next, shirt and whatnot. So obviously one of our biggest concerns that, as the behavioral response team, that we come out for too with respect to safety in the home is exit seeking, leaving the home, wandering. Especially in the later part of the day when there's the term sundowning, when there's a lot of confusion later in the day, they'll say that they want to go home even though they are at home. Because they're not necessarily recognizing their environment, they're wanting to go to a home because it's a sense of safety. They're not recognizing where they are, so they want to leave. And they may think it's their old home, the home that they grew up. So some of the things that we try and do here is door alarms, door locks, so double deadbolts or kind of locks on the top if it's nighttime wandering and you want to mitigate that risk. Visual cues to prevent exit seeking. So you see in there, in a lot of homes, it might put like a stop sign on the door, a band across the door. And then obviously through the Alzheimer's Society, Medical Alert now is the Safely Home Wandering bracelet, so if there is wandering from the home. And I'll get into some of the technology pieces as well. Obviously bedroom modifications, so floor mats outside of the bed. They're thin profiled mats, but at least if there's a fall outside of the bed, it mitigates the risk of fractures. Bed rails to help with transfers and getting up. Bed alarms, if you're worried about your loved one getting up at night and you want to be there to help them, bed alarms can be helpful. Installing night lights and maybe even making it motion activated. So I'm at my 16 minutes, but I'm close, I promise. Increased ability to transfer independently, and that's where an OT can definitely help with. Reducing clutter outside the bedroom. For going to the bathroom at night, we can definitely do commodes, urinals, things like that. So definitely another aspect of that is sleep hygiene. So, sleep hygiene is very important. Often we'll get reports that they're not sleeping at night and then they're sleeping in the daytime, so their circadian rhythm is impacted. So OTs can definitely come in and do a lot of sleep hygiene education. So things like maintaining a routine around bedtime, minimizing naps, ensuring appropriate continence products for the night. So maybe a heavier product that can take more, soiled items, feces and urine, minimizing caffeine and too much food at bedtime, obviously avoiding like alarm clocks with really bright LED lights because that can be stimulating, having a nice calming routine in the nighttime, whether it's a warm bath or even just applying a warm blanket at night and having a nice warm tea or something. It kind of sets the mood for helping them to go to bed. The other thing is a lot of daytime bright light. So getting outside and getting natural light as much as you can and having bright light within the home. But then as the evening starts to set in, actually start to slowly dim those lights, because dimming can actually activate chemicals in the brain, hormones in the brain that help to stimulate sleep. When you're out in the daylight, it stimulates hormones to keep you awake. Obviously using a sleep diary to help with gauging where some of the sleep pattern difficulties are. Engaging in a reasonable amount of activity throughout the day. Room temperature is very key. Obviously we want it to be dark at nighttime, but also cool, anywhere between 18 to 22 degrees. Have a comfortable bedtime routine. Obviously I talked about that. Yeah. Bathroom modifications, obviously labeling items, bathroom tub transfer bench, grab bars, non-slip bath mats, anything to kind of reduce falls risk. Another area in the bathroom that might be interesting for us to see is if your loved one's reporting that a stranger's been in the bathroom with them. That can often be when they're not recognizing their own image in the mirror. So what we might suggest is covering the mirror up or taking the mirror out so that they don't see that. Dressing activities, so laying out clothes in order, easy to wear clothing, breaking down the tasks. Maybe as a loved one, we're handing each item, one item at a time, one instruction at a time. If they're getting frustrated, the best thing for us to do is just stop, let them be frustrated, give them a minute, and then try again. Obviously, our biggest safety concern in the kitchen is, fire safety, burning items, leaving elements on, leaving things on the elements. There is some technology to help with that, but obviously we can label cupboards, we can put up instruction sheets to remind them the process of starting it, turning it off, even setting timers within the kitchen. But even within the kitchen, how can we help them engage in things? So I'm going to help my loved one, let them put the dishes away. And this is where you might adjust the expectation, is they may not put the dishes away how we would normally do it, and they're winding up in different places. Sometimes that's okay, because that's success for them. It's engagement for them. It's meaningful for them. And we can always remove the stuff and put it back where it needs to be afterwards. Obviously, leisure, it's a big component of that. Keeping them engaged in meaningful activities for them, keeping them active. If they're having trouble with some of the activities, can I help model it? Can I help do hand over hand or hand under hand and help them in terms of doing the task to get them kind of into that movement, and then they can kind of carry it on. And then obviously multi-sensory stimulation, giving them lots of stimulation throughout the day to keep the brain active. I'm going to skip over that. I've talked about that a lot. And the last one here is really the technology piece. So there is a lot more technology coming out these days. GPS tracking systems. SafeTrack is one of the websites that I've been able to kind of locate where an item that you can actually purchase within Canada. They're great because they have a variety of options, from a watch to also a sensor within the home that can actually help locate the individual within the home, and also let you know if they've opened a door. With the watches, you can set up geofences, so you can actually, if your loved one still goes out for walks, you set up geofences based on your GPS, and if they go outside of that fence line, you're alerted through an app. There's also soles that go inside shoes that are sensors, so if there's concern about wearing the watch, you can get the soles that go inside the shoes. Home alert systems, through St. Joseph's Healthcare, we have Connect Care, and there's also Lifeline. They have a variety of tools with the pendants that you can push, as well as fall sensors now as well. So if there is a fall within the home, it can sense that and contact these services and supports. Variety of medication management, so lock boxes or automatic medication dispensers. And the one thing I forgot to add on here is within the kitchen, there's an item called iPlug, which is a device about this big, and you actually take the plug for the stove out, plug this in, and then you plug the stove plug into the item, and then you set it up on top of the stove, and you can set a limit in terms of how much time afterwards, if it's running for and there's no activity, it will shut the item off. And they do make it specific to electric as well as gas stoves. So iPlug, and you can purchase it in Canada. So, pretty neat tool. So there's a lot more technology coming out day after day. And then just obviously other supports that we can do within the home. So CCAC, so getting PSW care in the home to help with personal care activities. Meals on Wheels if cooking becomes a concern and we want to get that meal support. Obviously adult day programs, the Alzheimer's Society, getting those supports within the home. To get an occupational therapist involved, just using CCAC, asking for a home safety assessment and consultation from an occupational therapist within the home is key. I love what I do, and I do really want to help stay at home as long as they can. So an occupational therapist can definitely come in with that perspective and looking at safety. So yeah, sorry I kind of rushed through it, but I'm all done now. And I can answer any questions after.